We're going to start off our curriculum with a very simple exercise in Maya that's going to give us an idea of how to animate using simple animation tools, and also talk about different types of motion using keyframes. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we have our environment set up correctly. So I have a new Maya scene here. Up in the top right hand corner, you can see that there is a workspace drop down. So we're going to go ahead, it's set to general, so we'll go ahead and drop that down, and we'll switch that to animation. Now animation is going to give you a couple of different options. Number one, it's going to have the graph editor down here. So if we click, we can open up the graph editor down there. And it's going to change our menu system up here to animation. It's going to open up all of our animation tools down here. And we want to make sure that we are set to 30 frames a second. If that is not visible, usually it's because this little rollout is unclicked. So go ahead and click that and set that to 30 frames a second. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the extents of our scene. So if you remember what we talked about in class, the timeline down here, the outer numbers are your scene extents. That is the total range of your animation. The inside numbers and this bar here are what you're viewing on the timeline. So we'll just set this to 50. The other option is you can double click on this inside number and you can set that to 50 as well. That will extend your scene. So we'll start at 50 frames. Now, if you hit spacebar, it'll give you your 4-up view. And we're just going to go up here and we're going to make sure that we're in the front view, and we're going to be working in the front view for our animation today. We'll just be doing it in the orthographic view. So we're going to start by creating 3 primitives. We'll go up here to create, we'll go down to polygon primitives, and we'll create a cube. Then we'll go to create polygon primitives and we'll create a sphere. And then we'll go to create polygon primitives and we will create a cone. These 3 objects are going to represent our 3 types of motion. So let's start by taking the cube and we're just going to move the cube up. Now you can move it freely using the axis tool, just clicking on an axis. You can also hold down the X button and that gives you grid snap ability. So we'll move now, snapping to the grid. We'll move it up 8 units. So you'll see over here in your translate, it'll say 8 units. The next thing we're going to do is we'll select our sphere. We're going to move this up, and we're going to move this up 5 units. And then we'll just go ahead and leave our cone. We can move that up 1 unit. So let's just move that up 1 unit. Now, we need to be able to see these, and sometimes when you're in shaded view, the background blends in. So you can go to shading, and you can say wireframe on shaded, and then you can see all of your objects here. Let's start by making the cube a little bit bigger. We want these all about proportionally the same size. So we'll scale this, and you can see you can scale it freely using the scale tool in the window, or you can do it numerically over here. If we set that to 2, you can see your square is now about the same size. Once we've done that, we can just go ahead and move this up just 1 more there so everything's kind of spaced out evenly. We want the cone to be facing along the axis, so we're going to do our motion from left to right in the front view. So we'll go ahead and rotate that 90 degrees, and you can see if you click on any one of these axes, it will actually show the axis that it's moving or rotating. In this case, rotate Z. If you type 90, you'll see it'll turn the cone the opposite way. We'll just go ahead and type -90. Now we've got our 3 objects here, and when we've moved them and rotated them and positioned them in space, you can see that they have some nodes and some old interference on there. They've got these translates in the Y, it's got a rotate in the Z, and because these are polygon primitives, each one of them carries with it a history node. So you'll see under the inputs and the channel box, and if you can't see your channel box, you might be set under something else. So just click on this little tab on the right hand side that says Channel Box Layer Editor, and you'll be able to see it. So you can see your channels here, you can see the scales and stuff. So we want to make sure that we've set a neutral pose for all of our objects. So you're just going to drag select around your 3 objects. We're going to go up here to Modify, and we're going to Freeze Transforms. Now when we do that, you can see it sets all of our rotates and translates to 0. All of our scales to 1. We'll use that a lot in this class. It also adds this transform geometry history node. Now history nodes aren't bad. They're kind of like a walk down what you've done to this object, but they also get pretty, they also drag on the scene. So they make the scene a little bit bigger, a little bit more bloated, and sometimes they can cause unexpected issues down the road depending on what you've done with the objects. So once we've modified and freeze transformed, we go to Edit, We're going to go to delete by type in history. Now we have all of these objects in a neutral state, and that gives us a chance to start our animation. Before we start, we want to rename these. So I'm just going to select the cube, and I'm just going to rename this to linear. Going to select the sphere, and I'm going to change this to cubic. And I'll change the cone, and I'll just call this bounce. Now these are going to reflect the types of motion that we're going to use. So let's just go ahead and select all three objects at the same time, and we're going to set our first key. You can see down in the bottom right hand corner that we have the auto key on. That is this little toggle here. When it's red, it means that it will automatically create a key when any value changes in the scene. But the first thing you have to do is you have to set the initial key. So here we are at frame 0, and I usually like to start at frame 0. You can also start at frame 1 if you prefer. Doesn't matter. It's a preference thing. We'll go to frame 0, and we will hit the S key. With all three of these objects selected, just hit the S key, and you see that it makes a tick mark here on the timeline. In your channel box, it'll turn all of these channels dark red, meaning that there is a key on this channel on this frame. If I scrub down, you'll see that these turn to light red. That indicates that there is not a key on this particular frame, but that these channels are animated. Let's go ahead and go over to frame 40, and we'll just take all of our objects and we're just going to move them over. Now again, we can just hold down X and we can snap to the grid, and you can set it to like 18 or 19 or any value. We just want the objects to be able to travel from point A to point B, and you want to be significant enough that you can see that motion. So let's just go ahead and snap it there to 20, and I'll hit S. Now, with these objects selected, let me open up my graph editor, and you can see by default, Maya creates these auto tangents, meaning that the tangents themselves are automatically generated by Maya, and you will have control over these tangents when you want them, but by default, it creates this curved line. So let's talk about what this really is in the graph editor. In the graph editor, the numbers along the bottom represent your frames. So this is time along the bottom. And on the left-hand side, these numbers represent value. So between 0 and 40 frames, you can see that the value of in particular, the translate X goes from 0 to 20. Now, all of these other lines down here, if I select all of my translates and scales and rotates, you can see that they're all flat lines because those values do not change. The only thing I changed was my translate X. But you can see that translate X, it starts out, and over the course of the first 10 frames, it really doesn't go very far. So if we look at our front view, we zoom out just a little bit and we scrub back, you can see that when we start, these objects move very slowly, and then in the middle they're moving the fastest, and then as they get to the end they're moving slowly again. This is called a slow out because we're slowing out of this key, and a slow in because we're slowing into this key. Now this is good motion, but sometimes you want linear motion. You want objects that move in a linear way. This could be mechanical objects or robotic or anything like that. So if we select our cube, this is going to represent our linear motion. And we'll see how this differentiates from the auto tangents that Maya creates. Again, select Translate X to highlight it. You can also select Translate X up here and it will isolate this curve in your graph editor. Then we're just going to drag a box around both of our keys. And we're either going to go up to our shelf here, or pardon me, our menus with our icons, and you can either click this little icon, which is linear tangents, or you can go to tangents and you can say linear. It will create the same result. So if you just click on this little icon, now these tangents are linear. So if you look at the cube versus the sphere, we just play through it. You can see that the cube is now moving at the same speed throughout the entirety of its motion. If you select the object, you can go up here to show. You can isolate selected and click on view selected. That will just hide the other objects temporarily in your scene. And then you can just play, and if you play, you can see that the cube is moving across the scene in a linear fashion. It's moving exactly the same speed. So let's go back here to isolate selected and turn that off. Now we'll select our sphere, and our sphere is actually moving pretty much exactly the way that we want it. You can see that it is slowing out, going very slowly at the beginning and then going very slowly at the end. One of the things you can do is you can go to the middle of this animation, in this case frame 20. You can key your translate X and it adds an additional key on it, and you can play around with these tangents. You can give it a lot slower, make it go a lot slower at the beginning and then a lot faster at the end. Okay, and you can also do this with tangents. The tangents are these little pink handles that come off of every key. In order to select the tangents, you just drag select the key, and then you can click on the tangents and you can move them freely. You can also do this with unweighted tangents in Maya, but we'll get to that later. Don't worry about that now. The easiest thing to do is to just set this key and then just to play around with this tangent or with this tangent here, just to see that the motion is different. So now our sphere is moving very differently. Again, if we go to Show, Isolate Selected, and View Selected, the sphere is moving very slowly at the beginning and very slowly at the end. Okay, so last but not least, let's go to our bounce. We'll just isolate this and we'll select our bounce. Now our bounce is our cone. So like the motion of the sphere, it's starting out very slowly, but unlike the motion of the sphere, we want to make it so that it's hitting an invisible wall. So let's go down here, and I'm actually going to make this motion overall quicker, a little bit faster. If you compress the time between two frames, it means that the object is moving faster. So down here in the timeline, we've got a lot of different functional tools. If you hold down the Shift key, you can click on the frame and you can see that it creates this little tiny blue handler. Take that blue handler and you can move it left and right. And you can see that in your graph editor, it is moving the key as well. So we're going to move this key up to frame 25. So now this motion is going to be a lot faster than our other motions. When we have this object hitting a wall, we want to change the tangents of this key right here. So instead of slowly entering into this position in the wall, we want to go ahead and change that to linear. So now we have an object that has a slow out, so a cubic tangent, and then we have this where it is a linear tangent. Now, I'm going to want this object to bounce. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here to frame 25, and then at frame 30, I'm going to take this object, I'm going to hit W and move the object backwards. So now you can see the object is going to hit, and it's going to bounce back. But because this object has inertia and motion, we want it to be pushing and continuing to try to get back to that place where it was. So we'll go here to frame 25, and another cool tool that you have in your timeline editor is you can click on the middle mouse button. If you click on middle mouse button, you can drag, but it doesn't change the scene. So you're basically taking a snapshot of everything at the scene at frame 25, and now I'm moving it to frame 35, and I'm just going to hit S. You can see that it makes a duplicate of that key, but as soon as I start scrubbing, you can see that it snaps back. So let's go do that again. Here at frame 17, I'm going to middle mouse button, and you see it freezes all of these objects. But as soon as I left click and I scrub, it automatically resets it to real time. So let's just go back and we'll play through. So now you can see that that cone is hitting that invisible wall and it is bouncing back. One thing we want to do is we want to select this last key and we want to make this linear as well. So now your object is bouncing, and if we show all of our objects, let's zoom out and we'll look at all of our objects, play back through. So we have our linear motion at the top, we have our cubic motion in the middle, and we have our bouncing motion down here on the bottom. And this is going to be the way that we're going to animate most of our assignments throughout this class. So the knowledge that you have from this, and once you nail this down, the rest of the assignments are going to be a lot easier having this foundational knowledge. All right, good luck. Ask any questions that you need and have a good time.